You know how sometimes you're trying to get a handle on a really big, sprawling topic?
Mm-hmm.
You want the key takeaways, those aha moments, the
Right.
connections, right? But without wading through just tons and tons of detail.
Yeah, information overload is real.
Exactly. So that's what we're aiming for today.
Right. We're doing a deep dive into Colin Wilson's Alien Dawn, an investigation into the contact experience.
Alien Dawn.
Yeah, think of it as us sort of navigating this huge landscape of, well, weirdness, really. Unexplained phenomena.
And highlighting the interesting bits.
Exactly. Through Wilson's lens, which is, philosophical, he was really interested in human potential, consciousness, that sort of thing.
Right. This book, it's from 98 or 99, depending where you look, and it sounds massive. He drew on, over 200 books, loads of interviews.
Yeah, it was a huge undertaking. And Wilson himself, well, he wasn't just some UFO hobbyist.
No, he had a background in existentialism, right? Consciousness studies.
Precisely.
Yeah.
So right off the bat, this isn't going to be your standard, are aliens visiting us kind of take.
Okay, so what's our mission here? What are we trying to unpack for listeners?
Well, we're not really trying to prove or disprove aliens. That's not the point.
Okay.
It's more about understanding Wilson's main arguments. How does he make sense of all these UFO reports, these contact experiences?
How does it fit with his other ideas, his philosophy?
Exactly. His whole new existentialism thing. And maybe most importantly, why should we even care? Why might his perspective matter for how we think about, well, reality, our own potential?
So it's about the meaning, the impact of these experiences, not just the hardware, so to speak.
Couldn't have put it better myself.
Yeah.
The meaning and the effect.
All right, so let's start with the man himself, Colin Wilson. 1931 to 2013, English writer, philosopher, wrote a lot of books.
An incredible amount. Over 80 by the late 90s, I think. Novels, philosophy, true crime, a real intellectual explorer.
And make it a bit controversial sometimes. I feel like I've heard that.
That's fair. Yeah, he definitely sparked debate. He burst onto the scene in '56 with The Outsider.
Yes, The Outsider, about people feeling disconnected, searching for meaning.
Exactly. And that really set the stage for his philosophy, this new existentialism or phenomenological existentialism.
Which was different from the more gloomy kind.
Yeah, much more optimistic, really focused on human potential, peak experiences, expanding our awareness. He kept saying our everyday consciousness is just like scraping the surface. It's limited.
And Alien Dawn seems like his big dive into UFOs and all that related stuff, not just a side project.
No, definitely his most substantial look at it, but always framed as this philosophical investigation into reality, into potential.
Okay, so the book itself, synopsis time. What's the core idea? The scope?
It's incredibly ambitious. He's trying to synthesize this huge range of stuff. UFO sightings, obviously, from historical accounts right up to modern ones. He mentions Kenneth Arnold, Philip Corso.
Corso, right, with the Roswell tech claims.
And then alien abductions, contact experiences, the whole spectrum.
But it's not just UFOs and aliens, is it? You said he brings in other weirdness.
Oh, yeah. He throws everything into the pot. Poltergeists, cryptozoology, Bigfoot, Nessie.
Seriously, Bigfoot.
Yep. Crop circles, cattle mutilations, out-of-body experiences, time slips.
Wow.
And he doesn't stop there. Ancient folklore fairies, gnomes, that whole tradition. Mysticism, psychic abilities. Uri Geller gets a mention, remote viewing.
He's connecting all of that to UFOs.
He's trying to show patterns, connections, even touches on quantum physics ideas, this notion of an information universe. It's a massive sweep.
Okay, so what's the thread holding all this together? What's his central thesis?
His main point, and this is really key, is that we just can't dismiss all this stuff, especially the persistent UFO and contact reports. We can't just wave it away because it doesn't fit our neat little scientific box, what he calls consensus reality.
Consensus reality. I like that term.
Yeah. He argues these phenomena are real in some meaningful sense, and we need to take them seriously.
So is he saying Bigfoot is an alien, or?
Not necessarily literally that in every case. It's more that these diverse phenomena, whatever their specific origin, might be acting as, well, catalysts.
Catalysts for what?
For the next step in human evolution. Consciousness evolution. He thinks they might be here to sort of jolt us, to wake us up to a bigger picture of reality.
Okay, that definitely sounds like Wilson, focusing on consciousness, potential.
Exactly. And he approaches it phenomenologically, emphasizing the subjective experience. He admits purely intellectual analysis might miss the point.
So he's open to things that seem unbelievable.
Very much so. Because that very unbelievability challenges our frameworks. His strategy is cumulative, pile up all this weirdness to show that our standard materialistic worldview just isn't cutting it. It can't explain everything.
So the goal isn't just aliens are real, it's reality is stranger and consciousness is key.
Precisely.
Yeah.
What do these mysteries tell us about reality itself and about our own minds?
All right, so he lays out this huge amount of strange stuff. How does he actually try to explain it? Does he land on a specific theory or just point out the weirdness?
He definitely puts forward ideas, but importantly, he sort of diverges from the standard extraterrestrial hypothesis, the ETH.
Okay, so not just nuts and bolts spaceships from Zeta Reticuli.
Right. He felt more aligned with thinkers like Jacques Vallée.
Yeah, we've talked about him. Folklore connections, high strangeness.
Exactly. And John Mack, the psychiatrist who worked with abductees, Wilson apparently felt this instant rapport with Mack, this shared sense that the reports just didn't fit our reality model.
So like Vallée, he looks at historical links, fairies and goblins being early UFOs kind of thing.
Very much so. He sees that continuity of anomalous experience across history. And he floats ideas, like maybe UFOs are unknown energy forms.
Energy forms?
Yeah, maybe from other dimensions, or even time travelers. Echoing Valley and John Keel there.
Other dimensions, time travel. Definitely stranger than just aliens from another star.
It is.
Yeah.
And some people interpret him as seeing these encounters, at least partly, as psychological events, like archetypal stuff bubbling up because our materialistic worldview is too narrow.
Inner events. Responding to materialism. Interesting.
Yeah, and he talks about a heuristic purpose.
Heuristic, meaning?
Like designed to teach us something, to decondition us from that consensus reality we keep mentioning. Like reality itself is trying to nudge us.
A teaching tool. From somewhere else. That's pretty mind-bending.
It is, and psychic abilities fit right in here for him.
How so?
He doesn't see things like telepathy or remote viewing as supernatural. He sees them as latent human potentials, linked to expanded consciousness.
Connecting to his faculty X idea.
Exactly, which we need to dig into.
Yeah.
He suggests maybe these entities, whatever they are, possess these abilities, or maybe they even trigger them in us during encounters.
But you mentioned earlier his evidence is largely anecdotal, right? Based on other people's books and interviews.
That's a fair criticism, yeah.
Yeah.
It's mostly drawn from that secondary literature, Valley, Keel, Mack, Ted Holliday, Linda Moulton Howe, tons of others.
So not a lot of primary investigation in this book.
Less primary research, more synthesis. And critics point to a lack of detailed footnotes sometimes, making it hard to track sources. Some called it an unfocused catalog of anecdotes.
So if it's built on anecdotes, how does he make it convincing? What's his method?
He called it pattern recognition.
Okay.
He's looking for recurring themes, surprising links between all these different types of weirdness. By showing the sheer volume and the overlaps, he argues materialism just falls short.
And the high strangeness itself is important, the bizarre details.
Crucial for him, those absurd reality-bending aspects. He sees them as a signifier, pointing away from simple explanations and towards that heuristic purpose, that teaching element.
And does he ever land on whether these things are, physically real or more like consciousness projections?
He kind of leaves it ambiguous, maybe deliberately.
Oh.
He acknowledges the physical reports, craft, landings, abductions, but he puts huge emphasis on the psychological, the consciousness side. It might reflect the complexity, maybe a non-dualistic view where mind and matter aren't so separate.
Or maybe just something beyond our current ability to categorize.
That too. Perhaps our current framework just isn't equipped for it.
Okay, let's zoom in on some of those big recurring themes then. You mentioned consensus reality.
Yeah, that's huge for him, the nature of reality. He really hammers this idea that what we normally perceive is just a sliver, a blinkered view, a scaled-down version.
So reality is much richer, stranger?
Exactly, more dynamic. He hints at things like an information universe, maybe like Talbot's holographic universe idea, where mind plays a much more active role. Anomalies, then, are like glimpses through the cracks.
Our senses are filtering out the weird stuff, basically.
That's the implication. Which leads to the second big theme, the potential of human consciousness.
His optimism comes through here.
Absolutely. Despite critiquing our normal low-pressure consciousness, he's really bullish on our potential for high-pressure consciousness, being more alert, engaged, intentional.
Peak experiences, like Maslow talked about.
Yeah, he borrows that, those moments where reality feels more vibrant, more real. And he brings in Husserl's idea of intentionality. Consciousness isn't passive, it's active, it directs itself. If we cultivate that intentionality,
we can expand our grasp of reality.
That's the core belief. We can potentially perceive more.
Which brings us to Faculty X. Sounds very X-Men.
Doesn't it? But it's a concept he developed earlier in a cult. It's his term for this latent human power.
Power to do what?
To reach beyond the present, to grasp the reality of other times, other places, intuitively.
Like mystical insight.
It
Or seeing the future.
kind of encompasses all that.
He.
Poetic insight, mystical union, feeling connected to history. For Alien Dawn, Faculty X is the mechanism. It's how we perceive these non-ordinary realities, the UFOs, the strange encounters.
So the weird stuff in encounters, time slowing down, altered states, impossible beings that might be Faculty X kicking in.
That's his suggestion. It shifts the focus a bit, doesn't it? Less about just alien tech doing weird things to us.
And more about how our perception is shifting, maybe being activated.
Exactly. It brings our own inner potential into the equation.
Okay. And the final theme you mentioned.
The interconnectedness of mysteries. We touched on it, but he really emphasizes it. UFOs, SALI, ghosts, cryptids, folklore, quantum weirdness, mystical states.
They're all linked.
He argues they are. That trying to explain them one by one in isolation misses the point. They're facets of one big mystery about reality and consciousness.
So the sheer range of weirdness actually strengthens his case for needing a new paradigm.
That's the idea. Look at all these puzzle pieces, he's saying. They don't fit the old picture. Maybe we need a completely different picture, one where consciousness is much more central.
It's like he's saying if you change your assumptions about reality, suddenly all these disparate anomalies start to look like part of a coherent, albeit strange, pattern.
You got it. A pattern involving a much more active, participatory role for consciousness.
Now, how does Alien Dawn fit into Wilson's, whole life's work? It wasn't just a random detour.
No, not at all. It feels like a very logical continuation, actually. Builds right on his new existentialism.
His optimistic version.
Right. Rejecting pessimism, focusing on potential, peak experiences, conscious evolution. Alien Dawn fits perfectly by framing the contact experience, even the scary parts, as a potential driver of that evolution, pushing us past our limits.
And his first big book, The Outsider. How does that connect?
Think about the outsider figure alienated, seeing the limits of normal life, searching.
Okay.
Well, UFO witnesses, abductees, they often become outsiders, don't they?
What?
Their experiences push them outside that consensus reality. They're forced to question everything, just like his original outsiders. There's a definite resonance there.
And he wrote a lot about the occult and paranormal before this too, didn't he?
Decades worth. Books like The Occult, Mysteries. He always saw these things as related explorations of hidden consciousness, the limits of the mundane. So Alien Dawn isn't a departure. It's applying that same lens, Faculty X, PSI, other dimensions, specifically to UFOs.
Even his interest in criminology, which seems unrelated in any connection.
It's maybe more indirect, but it shows his fascination with minds operating outside the norm. His outsider interest extended to criminals, people driven by intense inner forces, distorted perceptions. It's all part of his broader exploration of consciousness, just a different manifestation.
So Alien Dawn really feels like a culmination, bringing his philosophy and his interest in the unexplained together.
I think so, yeah. Seeing UFOs is another type of outsider experience that challenges consensus reality, all filtered through that optimistic evolutionary perspective.
Okay, so this ambitious, sprawling book comes out. How did people react? Was it well received?
It was definitely mixed, very mixed.
Okay, the good parts first.
Sure. A lot of people praise the sheer scope, his ability to pull so much together. It's readable, engaging. People called it thought-provoking, a valuable overview. If you were already into Wilson or open to this stuff, you probably found it fascinating. Some in ufology even called it required reading.
I sense a but coming.
Big but. The very thing people like the breadth, others saw as a weakness. That unfocused catalog of anecdotes criticism came up a lot.
Relying on secondary sources, lack of footnotes.
Exactly. Hard to verify things. Critics felt he didn't provide enough solid support for the big claim that this is all driving consciousness evolution. Some just found his own beliefs, his speculations, a bit too weird and distracting.
Accusations of bias, too, picking the evidence that fit.
That came up. And some harsh critics really didn't like his reliance on certain sources later in the book, calling parts paranoid ramblings.
Ouch.
Yeah. Kevin Shepard, a commentator, basically saw it as Wilson moving towards more sensationalist, popular stuff, lacking academic rigor, aimed at the public, maybe serialized in tabloids, which didn't help its academic standing.
So, a classic tension, accessible and popular versus scholarly and rigorous.
Precisely. It hit a nerve with people interested in ufology, the paranormal, Wilson's fans. But skeptics and academics wanted more solid evidence, tighter arguments. Its popularity probably fueled both readership and scrutiny.
Okay, stepping back then. How does Wilson's view stack up against other big theories about UFOs and consciousness? Where does he fit?
It's a unique blend compared to the straight ETH, extraterrestrial hypothesis.
Just aliens and ships.
Yeah, he's way more skeptical of that being the whole story, the high strangeness, the folklore links, the psychological depth. It doesn't all fit neatly. So he distances himself from simple ETH proponents like, say, Philip Corso implicitly was.
But he aligns strongly with Jacques Vallée.
Hugely. It's a really profound alignment. Skepticism of simple ETH, folklore links, high strangeness, psychological effects, leaning towards complex interdimensional reality bending, maybe a control system. He was clearly building on Valley.
And John Keel, Mothman guy.
Wilson cites Keel favorably. There's overlap there, too. Keel's ultra-terrestrial entities may be coexisting here from other dimensions, often deceptive or absurd. That resonates with Wilson's focus on high strangeness and linking UFOs to other paranormal stuff.
What about Carl Jung, the psychological angle?
Jung saw UFOs more as psychological projections, archetypes. Wilson takes the objective reality more seriously, I think.
But there's common ground.
Definitely. On the symbolic meaning, the role of consciousness, altered states, the inner event aspect, Wilson seems to be trying to bridge that gap, acknowledging both potential external reality and profound internal impact. Later thinkers connect Faculty X to Jung's active imagination.
And lastly, government disinformation theories. Mirage men stuff.
Wilson acknowledges secrecy, cover-ups, sure, but it's not his main focus. He's more interested in the intrinsic nature of the phenomenon and its link to consciousness, not primarily whether it's all a human psyop.
So Wilson's like a synthesizer, pulling threads from Valley, Keel, echoes of Jung, but running it all through his own optimistic evolutionary philosophy.
That's a great way to put it. A synthesizer and popularizer of those non-ETH consciousness-focused strands.
So wrapping up, what's the lasting impact? The significance of Alien Dawn, did it change things?
Within ufology, yeah, I think it had a real impact. It was a big, comprehensive push for non-ETH, consciousness-centered views. Became influential, required reading for some, inspired later writers like David Moore.
And beyond UFOs, in paranormal research generally.
It helped solidify his role there, too. By explicitly linking UFOs to psi, ghosts, cryptids, folklore, it let weight to that interconnected view, framed by his consciousness ideas, made the whole paranormal landscape seem potentially more unified.
What about mainstream philosophy? Did academics embrace it?
Probably minimal impact there. The subject matter, the popular style, it wasn't really aimed at academic journals, but it is an interesting application of existential phenomenological ideas to weird phenomena. It pushes boundaries, asks good questions about reality, consciousness, subjective experience, maybe more influence in transpersonal psychology or consciousness studies.
So the overall significance, what's the bottom line?
It's a major philosophically driven synthesis of Fortean's stuff. Its key contribution was popularizing that consciousness-centric, non-ETH view of UFOs, tied to his optimistic existentialism. Yes, it has limitations, the anecdotal base, the ambiguity, but its influence in challenging paradigms, promoting interdisciplinary thinking and contributing to that consciousness turn in paranormal studies is undeniable. Its value might really be in the questions it forces us to ask about reality in our own minds.
So, to boil it down, Wilson's argument is basically this weird stuff. UFOs, all of it. It's not just noise. It might be a catalyst, right? A wake-up call, challenging our narrow view of reality, hinting at a much bigger potential within our own consciousness.
Yeah, exactly. It's a perspective rooted in his whole new existentialism. Always pushing that idea that we're capable of more, that reality is richer and stranger than we usually admit.
So, here's a thought to leave people with, building on Wilson. What if all this persistent strangeness, the high weirdness, what if it isn't a mistake, a bug in the system? What if it's actually a feature, something prompting us, nudging us to explore the untapped potential of our own minds, our connection to a much bigger, stranger universe?
It definitely makes you reconsider things, doesn't it? How these ideas land for you personally, based on your own experiences or thoughts about the unexplained. Maybe check out more Wilson or Valley or Mac.
It's a deep rabbit hole for sure. Hopefully this dive gave everyone some new perspectives on these really persistent mysteries.
Indeed. Always fascinating territory to explore.
Well, thanks for taking this deep dive with us into such a complex and mind-bending topic. Until our next exploration.